Hey everybody, Mac here, and I want to welcome you to Halloween 2018, the day where you either love getting dressed up, love going out trick-or-treating, or in my case, love to have an excuse to watch my favorite genre of film, horror. On today's rant, I am going to be talking about some horror movies, specifically what I believe to be some of the most overrated horror movies in history. Obviously, I'm going to touch a little bit on my favorites as well, but this is a rant, and it's a lot easier to rant about something I don't like than something I like. So overrated horror movies is definitely the topic of the day. But before I get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the bell for notifications so you get all my new videos as they come out. Let's get into it, all right? I love horror movies. It is, as I said before, my favorite genre of film. My first memorable experience with horror movies. I think I was 7 years old and I had free reign to what we now everybody knows cable, but it was the infancy of cable. And I ran across the uncut version of The Exorcist. And I had nightmares for 2 weeks. After that, I became a horror movie nut. I just developed a love for the genre. Now I watch them. I love watching B horror movies. I love seeing horror movies that will actually scare me. I love seeing horror movies that will mess me up psychologically. I love watching horror movies because they're gory. I love all reasons to watch horror movies. Some people call it sadistic. I just say, you know what? It's kind of a release, just like watching any movie is kind of a release. Horror is a true escapist genre, and that's why I love it so much. Just to touch very briefly on the horror movies that I love. You can probably tell by what's going on back here. I'm a huge fan of Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm a huge fan of Friday the 13th. Yes, I'm well aware how bad those series got as they went along, but I still stuck with them the whole time. When they went at each other in Freddy vs. Jason, which was like the least horror movie of all of them, it's just awesome seeing these two icons go at it. Obviously, The Exorcist, even though I had a really traumatic situation with it, it's a great horror movie. The Shining is one of my favorite psychological horror movies. As far as just flat out disturbing, Silence of the Lambs, I would even classify Seven as a horror movie because, man, that thing is still terrifying. But when it comes to horror, I will watch anything, whether it's B-movie or top tier. Probably one of the best recent horror movies I've seen, easily Hereditary. Man, that is a crazy movie. So like I said, that's just a few of my favorites. But we're not here to talk about my favorites. We're here to talk about what I consider to be the most overrated horror movies. Now, overrated doesn't necessarily mean the movie is bad. If it's bad, I will say it's bad. But when I say overrated, I mean it got a lot of critical or audience praise, and I don't think it deserved it. I have to share something with you. In my research for this list, I found a bunch of people that, listed some overrated horror movies. And all my favorites that I just listed were actually listed as overrated, like The Exorcist, Silence of the Lambs, The Shining. You're all dumb, all right? Those movies are friggin' amazing. The Shining was at the top of one of the lists. The Silence of the Lambs was at one of the top of the lists. You guys are nuts, all right? I know we're all expressing our opinions, but, come on, really? So I'm going to share with you what I believe to be some of the most overrated horror movies that I have seen. Please keep in mind, I watch a lot of movies, but I haven't seen them all. So there are probably some I'm not really aware of. First that I thought of, when it came out, a lot of people latched onto this because it was a slasher movie, but it's a very poor excuse for a slasher movie, in my opinion. That would be I Know What You Did Last Summer, starring Sarah Michelle Gellar, Freddie Prinze Jr., Jennifer Love Hewitt, all the three namers are all in there. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Yes, it's overrated, but it's also bad. It is a poor excuse for a slasher film. It's too dark, it's too predictable, and the acting is just god-awful, especially for actors that can sometimes be okay, especially Sarah Michelle Gellar. She's amazing in Buffy, and she's just wasted in this movie. I Know What You Did Last Summer was insanely popular, even spawned a sequel with the ingenious name, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Wow. I wonder what studio had thought that one up. Maybe they got a nice $1 million bonus for that gem. Their idea of an iconic villain is a fisherman in a yellow coat with a hook. Wow. Super scary, guys. Watch out. One of my more controversial picks is actually a movie that came out, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago, and it is called It Follows. The thing about It Follows is that the concept in the story is awesome. It's basically if you have sex with somebody, that entity like follows you and like creeps up on you until you have sex with somebody else to pass it on. It's like The Ring, but with intercourse. And I thought that was a really great horror movie concept. And I saw it and I'm like, this is boring and really style over substance. Like very, very showy. The director was all about setting the atmosphere with the creepy music and the slow walks and seeing something slowly come towards you. Not my thing, man. I just thought it was pretentious and overlong. And honestly, when they started fighting with the unseen entities, it was like air throwing them across things. And I will tell you right now, the climax of the movie, the big third act's, wrap up in the pool was ridiculous. So, It Follows, not one of my favorites. Another one, and this kind of spawned the found footage craze of the late 2000s. Paranormal Activity. Man, this movie was a chore. And the thing is, I'm okay with the found footage idea. But the thing, if you keep doing it and you don't have a payoff, it was like 45 minutes of watching people sleep. Then when they weren't sleeping, they were the most uninteresting, boring characters ever. And then when they're put in danger at the end, you don't care because you are not invested in them. So no. And then that movie, again, being so successful, spawned like 8,000 sequels. I think finally it might be on its way out, which I'm totally fine with because I got enough of Paranormal Activity. Not to mention that spawned so many horror movies that were just found footage, and most of them were completely forgettable. One of my least favorite horror movies, and it could have just been with the build-up coming to it, but The Blair Witch Project. This was revolutionary because it was one of the first movies to really kind of have like an internet presence. At the same time, it was a shaky cam movie, and a lot of people were trying to convince other people that it was real. My brother at the time worked for newspapers and he was reviewing movies. He actually got to see an early screening of The Blair Witch Project, and he raved about it, how amazing it was, how scary it was, how real it was, and you guys can't believe how good it's gonna be when you see it. So we got a huge group of people and we all went to see it, and man, the general consensus was, this is awful. Again, an hour and 25 minutes following three characters you don't care about with a payoff that makes absolutely no sense and is not even a payoff. It's a dude standing in a corner. So Blair Witch, unbelievably successful, critically praised. I hated it. Now, because of its success, it also spawned a sequel that was even worse than the original. Yes, I saw the sequel too. I like watching bad movies, and man, that was a bad movie. Another horror movie I greatly disliked, and I disliked the series, but it started with the first one, is Saw. People always say, oh yeah, the Saw movies definitely went off the rails, but the first one was great. No, it wasn't. It was not great. It was not even really adequate for me. It had this great shocking ending, but like they had this whole subplot with Danny Glover that made no sense to me. I didn't buy into it when it first started, and I still don't buy into it now. I know they just tried to reboot it with Jigsaw. It's done. It was done before it even started. I am not a fan of the Saw movies. Now the next one is definitely a case of being overrated, but not awful. And it is the 1990 version of Stephen King's It. No, I'm not referring to the 2017 version because I love that one. It is mediocre. And its only saving grace has to be Tim Curry as Pennywise. That is an iconic performance, but unfortunately the movie that surrounds it is not great. The first part of it with the kids is way better than the second part. The ending is just pathetic, especially if you've read the book and you understand how the ending is supposed to go, and then they end up fighting a giant spider. You're like, oh man, it's a giant spider. A lot of people saw that and they're like, oh, that was like, one of my first scares when I was a kid. Yeah, that didn't scare me at all. Now, my last one I'm going to talk about, and I know there are going to be some really angry people. George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. Okay, hold on, all right? Let me explain. Night of the Living Dead was revolutionary. He followed up with Dawn of the Dead. Now, here's the deal with Dawn of the Dead. I love the satirical aspect of Dawn of the Dead. I love the makeup effects and the special effects of Dawn of the Dead. However, I think it went on too long, and I think George Romero was beating us over the head with his point. I get it, George, okay? they all going back to the mall because that's where they were in life. They want to go back there in death, and you're talking about the consumer mentality. I got it, but that movie went on way too long. And here's where people are going to get mad at me. I like Zack Snyder's remake better. I do. I really do. I think the fast zombies, even though people are like, why would there be fast zombies? Be like, dude, they're not zombies at all. They don't exist. So you can do whatever you want with them. So if he wants to make them fast and run, that makes it a heck of a lot scarier. I know I was a lot more scared. I loved the new remake of Dawn of the Dead, and I actually liked it better than the original. I don't think I'm alone in it, but I definitely know I'm in the minority when it comes to that kind of thing. Now, I could draw this list on and on and on, but I just wanted to briefly touch on what I believe are like some of the most overrated horror movies that I have seen. There are more, but like I said, I don't have time for that. But now, I want to hear from you guys. What are some horror movies that you have seen that people just rave about that you think are completely overrated, that aren't scary, that aren't gory, that did nothing for you? Tell me in the comments. Again, you're leaving me great comments. I love reading them, and I want to know about horror movies. And while you're there, go ahead and tell me some of the ones you like as well. Horror is a great genre. It's a huge genre. There's so much to explore and so much to talk about. And that's what the internet is for. So thanks for coming to my Halloween rant. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can come back and get all the other rants. Happy Halloween. As you can see, I'm ready for it and I'm excited for it. And until next time, this is Mac saying, I am out. And by the way, this is real metal. Crazy, right? Listen to it. Whoo! You can take somebody's eye out with this thing.